Welcome to another episode of Sacred Reviews. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at A Wind Named Amnesia, an animated movie originally released in Japan back in late December of 1990, and later brought over to the States by Central Park Media in 1993. And while that information is rather boring and standard, it's a bit hard to know how to address A Wind Named Amnesia in terms of the plot. The sheer difference between the English dub and the sub version of this movie are so striking that I don't even feel like they're the same movie. But I'll get into those details when I cover the plot. But before I jump into the mess of the plot, I like to cover the other aspects of the movie, such as the animation and sound. In terms of art, the movie is well beyond showing its age, but that is to be expected considering it's over 20 years old at this point in time. And I'd be lying if I thought the movie was ugly, although the best aspects of the film may be some of the backgrounds, which appear to have been done in watercolors and are a real treat to look at. And outside of the aging issues, the animation is rather well done for the time. In terms of sound, the voice acting for the English dub is okay. It isn't anything special in my opinion, but it isn't irritating like some of the voices found in the Fire Emblem OVA. And the voice actors do a decent job conveying the emotions of the characters, even if some of those lines are comprised of guttural noises. On the music side of things, the movie is rather decent as well. In fact, the best parts of the score may be the opening where we witness the first of many fights with a giant robot, and the ending scene where the main character begins to walk back to his jeep in order to continue his journey. In terms of basic setup, the movie starts us off in a post-apocalyptic world that was brought forth by a wind that left amnesia in its wake. All the collective knowledge of humanity was lost in a matter of minutes, and all that remains are the tattered remnants of human civilization which have been regressed back into cavemen. The story surely starts with a young wanderer named Wataru, who was educated at a research facility by a cyborg known as Johnny, and given a quest to learn what the heart of this beast we call man truly is. Along his travels, he meets up with a mysterious woman known as Sophia and manages to come into the crosshairs of an extremely dangerous robot, simply referred to as the Guardian, which pursues him throughout his journey. Though the real beast in this series is going to be the plot, and the English dubbing of the plot can be described as a mess that manages to utterly ruin this movie. The sub I came across is accurate. And to give an example of this issue, we're going to compare the English dub of a scene against the same scene using English subtitles.
Poor kid. No wonder she's got nightmares. But does their God really exist?
Perhaps. What's important for you to remember is that the men who were chasing her believe it does. So to those men, sacrificing her to appease him is natural.
It's disgusting.
Sacrifices were offered to the gods for thousands of years after man first looked up and recognized unknowable forces ruling him. In terms of his history on Earth, the custom was stopped only the blink of an eye ago. And now that the wind has blown away the old restraints, the old certainties, it's not surprising he's returned to it. And you, Are you so certain of your own values that you're prepared to impose them unthinkingly on others? To choose their way of life for them? To tell them what is good and what is bad? Demanding obedience by force if necessary? You don't understand yet. Anyway, the sacrificial ceremony, or marriage, if they'd rather call it that, is scheduled to take place in front of their altar tomorrow night if they recapture her by then.
I feel for her. A marriage, even to a god, which she didn't want, would have been enough to make her run away, but if her life's threatened as well, she has the right to live her own life.
Mm-hmm.
なんだろう、砕き飲み干すものって。本当に神様なんているんだろうか。
そうね。でも、その神の怒りを鎮めるために花嫁を送ることは、彼らにとって当然の行為なのかもしれない。この星の上で、人類は生贄という儀式を発明するまでに何万年かかったのかしら。それを思い出して、すべてが始まってから2年しか経っていないのに、今の人類は身につけたのね。ねえ、渡る。人間はそんなにも自らの限界を決めてしまいたいの？より優れた存在を設定し、その庇護の手のひらにすっぽりと包まれて、平穏な一生を送りたいの？ごめんなさい。難しい言い方をしてしまったわね。とにかく、式は明日の晩。この子は見張りの隙を見て、逃げ出してきたの。
そりゃそうさ。いくら神様だと信じてたって、いきなりお嫁さんになれちゃ誰だって逃げ出すよ。自由に生きる権利は誰にだってあるんだ。
As you can see, the English dub is far more pretentious, yet this is the point of the scene entirely, and leaves me with a sort of bitter resentment towards the dub in general, since this is an issue that keeps popping up. It even rears its head when discussing one of the worst scenes in the movie, regardless of which version you're watching.
Wataru, There's something I should tell you, assuming you haven't guessed already.
Yeah?
We caused the wind and let it blow over the earth. It was no accident. It was done deliberately. Yes. I represent the power of a distant planet. We have kept watch on your world since life first appeared on it. The first creatures that crawled out of the water, the dinosaurs that ruled for so many centuries, and finally the coming of man. Till very recently, you were not thought to be a danger to us, but when you broke free of the Earth's gravity, we started to be afraid of your leader's aggressiveness.
That they'd attack?
We weren't sure, but we couldn't take the risk.
So you sent the wind?
Yes. Though since we met, I think it was a bit hard. There was a second reason beside the need to defend ourselves, and that was done for your own good. Men have always said what they desire most is happiness, and yet their actions seem to lead in the opposite way. By removing the baggage of their memories, we gave them the chance to make a new beginning, a beginning that might lead them towards the goal they claim to want.
Wataru, そろそろあなたに話しておかなければいけないわね。
え？
おそらくもう分かっているとは思うけれど。そう、あの風を吹かせたのは私たちよ。私たちはずっと見続けてきたわ。この星に最初の原始生命が誕生した時から40億年。そして待っていたの。やがて自分たちの重力圏を飛び出してきたあなた方が私たちの仲間になれるかどうか。
ダメだったんだね。
いいえ、結論は出なかったのよ。
じゃあどうして？
そうね。あなたを見ているとそう思うわ。それでも私たちの大部分は一つの判断を下したの。人類から記憶を奪い、文明という名のプレッシャーを取り除いてみたのよ。その時、裸となった人類がどのような行動をとるのか。
And while both scenes are horrible and make the aliens out to be monsters, it's easier to overlook this issue in the sub since the important part of the scene is the question being asked rather than the events that led up to it. In fact, this question about what truly motivates humans and their nature is a constant aspect of the movie. So phrasing the aliens' actions in terms of finding the answer to a philosophical question reinforces the nature of the movie, while the English dub changed the material enough to make it come across as something I expect in a dumb action flick. With all that being said, is the plot any good? If we were addressing English dub, then I'd say no, and I can't express how strong that no is without using some French, if you catch my drift. And I like to avoid making this video require an age limit because of inappropriate language. It's almost impossible to sum in words how pretentious the English dub is and how lacking it is in terms of abilities to support the sheer weight of it. It's a movie that has turned a more philosophical piece into an action movie, and removes any sort of defense the story could have had for its events that occur throughout it. If we're dealing with the sub-version of this movie, then I'd call it a decent attempt at addressing the issue of what it means to be human, but there are better and more interesting attempts out there. All this doesn't change the fact that the movie is probably at least worth a watch in this format, since it can at least be appreciated as an anime classic. This movie does contain a few questionable plot elements, such as the black shaman, who is one of only 2 black people in the entire movie, and the only one who has a role of note. And considering his state of dress, I'm not entirely sure where this scene would be on a scale of 1 to 10 when it comes to racism, with 1 being not racist, a 5 being racist, and a 10 being extremely racist. And while I put it on a 5 or higher side of the scale, I'm not sure how high it should be on that side of the scale. Another issue with the movie is that it includes a few scenes of nudity, and while I can overlook the first to a degree, it's impossible for me to overlook the sex scene that occurs near the end of the movie. It feels entirely out of place, and the dialogue used in the sub would probably make a feminist want to scream sexism, considering Sophia offers to bless Waru in a purely human way. And the final issue is at the ending itself. The ending of this movie is rather open-ended, and as such, the questions being asked aren't truly resolved in my opinion. On some levels, this is understandable since the movie is meant to make you think about the topic, but it would have been nice for the people behind this film to put forth their own opinion on the topic as well. Despite a few of the more questionable plot elements, I consider A Wind Named Amnesia a decent film if you're dealing with the sub, and that the sub I found is an accurate representation of the work. It makes it clear the film is meant to be more of a philosophical piece on what it means to be human, and as such the reasons behind the wind are as important as what we can learn about humanity when it's reduced to its most primitive state. And while many movies have tried to address this issue before, and a few have been more successful, I'd still say this movie is worth a look considering it should be considered an anime classic.